Hey, Beastista here, and welcome to week 2 of the WDC. This week, we are playing against Matrix, the owner of the WDC. So he is not only just the owner, he's also the individual that has helped me the most preparing for matches, and is almost certainly the person who I've played more Pokemon games against than any other human on Earth. So it's going to be a tricky week no matter what, because Matrix knows my prep style and what I lean towards in general, and has a very good ability to probably understand and read me in a reasonable sense. However, I have the same. So generally speaking, I would say that I normally do very well against Matrix historically in matches that don't matter. So like in prep matches and fun matches or things that don't work. However, historically, Matrix has beaten me in very important games. And so I don't know who that advantage is, since this is only week 2. However, it's definitely always a tricky match whenever you're playing someone that you know as well as this person. Here we can see the matchup. So Matrix has some very powerful mons. The big scary mons are Arcanine and Rillaboom. Those are kind of generically the most powerful mons. They're very good offensive stats, but they also have very supportive moves, like Will-O-Wisp, Knockoff, Snarl, things like that, in addition to their massive damage. Matrix also has some really good support mons, in Lumise with Prankster support, Chimecho, which has the ability to deal with some anti-trick room things. In addition to that, they also have Tinkaton that has Mold Breaker Fake Out, which is really good at dealing with my anti-priority, and also has a good support move pool. And so, in addition to that, he has some pretty powerful offense, and Crawdont, Gengar, and Jolteon, and then Como, which is just generically a really annoying Pokemon. So the plus side in this matchup is that I have 6 Pokemon on my team that are slower than every single Pokemon on Matrix team. That means that if I'm able to get a Trick Room up, they are kind of in a really awkward position in which I can outspeed them with pretty much my entire team, unless they choose to be like Iron Ball or Room Service, which is something that we can try to play around to some extent, but is a little bit but is definitely nice in that aspect. So looking at the Pokemon I like, I definitely think that Rhyperior seems really good. Their team does not particularly like ground coverage. It's very powerful into a lot of their team, other than like the Rillaboom. And so if you're able to get a good Terra type, that's pretty good. I also think that Farigiraf is very important, even if I don't bring it. Having it somewhere in my 6 and throwing a switch in seems very important at making them be hesitant to click fake outs or do some sort of shenanigans with Lumise or Grassy Glides or Aqua Jets and things like that. I think that one of their best Trick Room or slow Pokemon generally is Crawdont, and so I definitely think we want a powerful way to deal with that, in which I think Hydrapple is one of the better options. And from there, I was kind of debating between a couple of options, and like Conkeldurr, Primarina, Camerupt, in which all of those have really beneficial offensive categories, but are really awkward defensively. And so I ended up deciding to not include any of those and go with these 6. So I started with Ariados. I like Ariados because, one, bug coverage is honestly not terrible. 2 of their big mons that I'm concerned with are Crawdont and Rillaboom, in which Stab Lunge can do a really good chunk of damage. Rage Powder can also help me set up Trick Room, in which their only real way to deal with that is Rillaboom, which can ignore the Rage Powder. With the Aqua Berry, we can guarantee survive pretty much any single attack, so that Rage Powder can kind of let you set up Trick Room or just generically do that. And then in addition to the lunge, we get knockoff and sucker punch, which is good neutral damage and priority damage specifically as well with the Ariados. And I went with Terra Dragon just so that it can survive the fire moves a little bit cleaner, and also just as a ploy to kind of make them think that I don't have like something like Aqua Berry, so that there's a good chance they might try to go for a fire move. So next up is Farigiraf, in which I decided to go with Sapsicker instead of the ability to stop priority. And this was one, I think that just having the giraffe in general would dissuade them from bringing priority, but also one of the cleanest ways for them to just deal with Farigiraf is something like a choice ban Woodhammer into my Mon, in which obviously I can have a Terra that can avoid that. However, the idea is a Terra Fairy plus Sapsicker definitely completely just walls almost any Rillaboom that I'm expecting to see. And so that seems really beneficial. And in addition, the only real priority that I'm expecting is probably Fake Out from Tinkaton, which has Mold Breaker, which would mean it ignores it in general. We decided to go with a little bit more offensive leaning one with Throat Spray. The reason behind this is I'm assuming Matrix is going to have a lot of anti-Trick Room stuff, and one of the better ways to just deal with anti-Trick Room stuff is just to go on the offensive with my Trick Room setter. So if they do something like Roar in front of me, click their own Trick Room to counteract it, Imprison, I can, instead of clicking one of those moves, I can just go for damage and be in a really good position, especially if I have Rage Powder support as well. Next up, we have Rhyperior. We have Clear Amulet in order to avoid Intimidates from the Arcanine. Also, there's some other things that could be relevant, like, Fake Tears on the Lumise, but it's mainly for the Intimidate. This one's pretty straightforward. High horsepower, Iron Punch, Rock Slide, just as good coverage. It hits pretty much everything on their team for at least neutral. I decided to go with Terra Flying because I think there's pretty much nothing that's going to hit that for super effective. And it's just kind of a good neutral typing. The big downside with Rhyperior is it's definitely a Terra Hog this week, because Rillaboom just cleanly one-shots it. I considered some like grass berries and things like that, grass resist berries and things like that, but nothing really can hell survive a Woodhammer from Rillaboom unless you tear it out of its weakness. Next up, we have Hydrapple. Hydrapple, similar to Rhyperior, can underspeed every single thing on their team in Trick Room. I like Hydrapple for a couple reasons. One, the Dragon, Earth, or Dragon Ground and Grass coverage hits almost everything on their team for super effective. In addition, one of the Pokemon I am concerned with is Crawdon, and having the double resist to water is really nice. In addition to having the double resist to water, Energy Ball is a clean one-hit KO on almost any Crawdon set. And then we have the Terra Steel in order to take some like random ice coverage, random fairy coverage that they might have. Next up, we have Sableye. I went with Mental Herb. I don't know if it's the correct decision, but I liked the idea of Mental Herb because they do have a lot of mons that have Taunt, such as Tinkaton, Rillaboom, Crawdon, and I would rather not take, lose the ability to use non-damaging moves. And with Terra Steel, I don't really tend to click it, but basically, it's a reasonable defensive typing to the possibility of fairy coverage. I went with Quash just because I wanted some alternative speed control outside of Trick Room in case they are super annoying with like Iron Balls and Room Service. I went with Encore because I do want to be able to make it awkward for them to click Fake Outs. I also, because I have a couple of 4 times resist and some immunities, Encore can also be really powerful. For example, Encoring Rillaboom into a grass move in front of my Farigiraf could be really powerful. I went with Reflect because though they have some relevant special attackers in Gengar and Jolteon, I don't expect them to come because they're both pretty weak into my team because they are so frail. And they're not going to really threaten any of my Pokemon for one-hit KOs. However, I threaten them with one-hit KOs in return. And then finally, we have Bronzong. So Bronzong, we can't run the Citrus because it's on the Hydrapple, so we kind of just went with the Agua. I think there's a chance that maybe Leftovers would be better. We went with Iron Defense Body Press, just because, I think their team's going to be a little bit physical. In addition, that's one of the best damage we can do with it. We have the Trick Room, and we have Psychic Noise to help deal with their recovery from leftovers, or not leftovers, grassy terrain, and then Heat Proof specifically to be able to take hits from Arcanine a little bit better, and then obviously Trick Room in order to get Trick Room up. I don't know how confident I feel in this matchup, but let's see how it goes. So here we are for game one. So they are Terra Steel, Chimecho, Terra Water, Crawdaunt, Terra Water, Tinkaton, Terra Dark, Rillaboom, Terra Ground, Arcanine, and Terra Fire, Kommo-o. So I decided I want to lead Farigiraf just because that was kind of my game plan. My game plan was honestly to lead Farigiraf and Ariados. I don't know if this is the correct decision based on the Pokemon they had. However, I kind of just feel like those are the reasonable ones. I decided I want to bring Hydrapple because I am a little bit concerned of Crawdaunt, and in addition, I think it is pretty good defensively into a lot of the Pokemon they have, especially if Tinkaton doesn't have fairy coverage. And then finally, it's between the other three, and I think Bronzong makes a lot of sense at being able to set up Trick Room in the back. Rhyperior also seems really good offensively. I decided to go with Bronzong. I honestly don't have a large reason to do it, but I do think that Iron Defense Body Press does seem pretty good into a lot of the Pokemon. And so with that, let's get into the game. So they lead Arcanine and Rillaboom, and I lead my Farigiraf and Ariados. So they get an Intimidate, which is a little bit annoying to my Ariados, and they get the Grassy Terrain up, which I don't think is too big of a deal. So here I don't really want, I assume that they probably have Roar on this Arcanine, so there's some justification to go for Rage Powder. However, I also don't want to get randomly punished by Safety Goggles Roar Arcanine, so I decided to just go with an offensive attack in Hyper Voice to get a little chunk, get my special attack boost. And I consider going for a Fairy in order to play around a knockoff from the Rillaboom, but I decide I don't really want to waste my Terra here, and I just go for a lunge into this Rillaboom to lower its attack and get a pretty good chunk of damage off. I think there's some justification to go for a knockoff instead of a lunge in order to get rid of an item, but I do think just lowering the attack damage of this Rillaboom seems relevant. The Flamethrower does a reasonable chunk of damage into my Ariados. However, this is the reason why I am the Occaberry. They go for a Taunt, which makes my decision to go for Hyper Voice feel pretty good. There was nothing I could do to stop that since Rage Powder doesn't stop the Rillaboom. However, and so I'm very happy that I just went for the Hyper Voice, getting the +1 special attack on turn 1, given with the Throat Spray. The lunge does honestly a pretty good chunk of damage into the Rillaboom and lowers its attack. Definitely did more damage than I was expecting. So based on how much damage it did in the previous turn, now that I'm +1, I feel like Hyper Voice should just kill this Rillaboom. So I decided to just go for another one. And so here the big question is, do I want to go for an attack or a Rage Powder or even Terra to play around a Flamethrower into it? And I decide that I'm just going to go for a knockoff into the Arcanine, try to get it to lose its item and do a little bit of damage into it because I don't expect Hyper Voice to be anywhere close to killing it. So I decided to switch in Tinkaton here, which is a pretty good decision given that I went for Hyper Voice, so it's going to take this really well. And so they also reveal a really cool tech in which they get Howl, which is going to increase the attack of the Tinkaton that just switched in, and also, because they are Throat Spray, give a special attack boost on this Arcanine. Now it's at +1 special attack. I'm able to luckily do a pretty good chunk of damage with into the Arcanine, and the knockoff does an okay chunk of damage as well. Sadly, with the Grassy Terrain, I do not think that Sucker Punch is going to do enough damage to kill the Arcanine. And so here I decide, I debate the idea of just tearing to play around a knockoff, but I don't think it's really worth it. And so I think the play is just going for a Thunderbolt, doing the most damage I can into the Tinkaton. And we can go for a Sucker Punch to try to kill this, Arcanine as best we can, or just go for a Rage Power to make sure that my Farigiraf takes a hit. And that's what I decided to do. Maybe there's a chance that in actuality it would have been better to just go for the Sucker Punch. I think Sucker Punch might have killed Arcanine here now, in hindsight, but I don't think it's an unreasonable assumption to think that it would not, given that knockoff is basically the same base power as the Sucker Punch. But it's not the end of the world that Ariados goes down there. And so here we shook off the Taunt, which is pretty good, and I decide between bringing out the Bronzong and the Hydrapple, and I decide that Hydrapple seems a little bit more impactful because I can try to get kills on some of these Pokemon. So here, the big question is do I want to just go for offense or try to set up the Trick Room with the Free Graph? And I decided to set up the Trick Room. And here, I definitely want to kill the Arcanine because I think it is the bigger threat, especially with Bronzong being in the back, being a little bit physically bulkier. I don't want to deal with the +1 thing. And so the big question is do I want to Terra or not? The plus side of Terra is if they go for a Fairy move or a Steel move into Hydrapple with the Tinkaton, I will take it better. However, if they go with a Flamethrower, this could just be the end of the game. I decide to go for the read that they're going to go for a Steel or Fairy move instead of the Flamethrower into my Hydrapple. So we just hope that the Flamethrower, they don't do a Flamethrower into it. They click Flamethrower, but luckily it goes into Frigoraph, which does survive that pretty cleanly. And they went for a Gigaton Hammer, going for the double up, getting the clean kill on the Frigoraph, which is sad, but is okay given the fact that I did go for the Earth Power into the Arcanine, and now the Arcanine is dead. So we are down to a 2v3. However, the Rillaboom is pretty low, and their Tinkaton, though, at +1 is not going to be doing the most damage. However, they show that their last mon is Chimecho, which is quite annoying in the fact that it's going to be hard to deal with, but luckily does not threaten a lot of damage. So if I'm able to attack around it, I should be able to do a pretty good chunk of damage. And so here the big question is do I want to actually ignore the Chimecho or not? And I decided I just want to go for the Earth Power on the Tinkaton. If their Tinkaton is not super bulky, this Earth Power should be a 2-hit KO onto it. However, if it's Sylvester bulky, it won't. So they go for the knockoff, which honestly does more damage than I was hoping. I lose my recovery, and they go for a Yawn, which at this point I'm feeling pretty awkward about my position. However, I do, get about 40% damage with this and get to a +2, so that hopefully I will be able to threaten this Tinkaton with a body press. And so here, the plan is just to set up Trick Room, try to get a little bit of speed damage. I don't think another Earth Power is going to kill, so I decided to do a little bit of damage into this Chimecho, which is now very annoyingly threatening me with Yawns. So they go for the knockoff and the Hydrapple, getting rid of my Citrus Berry. So completely lost all my recovery outside of grassy terrain, which I will get back when Rillaboom enters again. We go for the Fickle Beam. I'm not sure if this is the best move, since another Earth Power would definitely put Tinkaton in range of a body press. However, we see that they are leftovers on the Chimecho, which definitely makes me feel like that Fickle Beam ended up being not relevant. So at this point, I definitely can say that this game feels like it's going to come down to sleep turns, which, though annoying, I think could put me in an okay position now that my Bronzong is at +2. I go for the body press, hoping to kill the Tinkaton. I luckily get a crit. With the damage calcs I've done, it seems very unlikely that I would have killed without the crit. I think with the crit, it was a guaranteed crit based on how much it had. I had about 60-ish%, but I didn't really check with Matrix to see what the exact life was, but definitely think that crit did matter based on how bulky I found out that the Tinkaton was. So now they were able to reverse Trick Room with Chimecho, and now we get to the position where if I can kill this Rillaboom, I think with one of my Pokemon up, I think I should be able to win. And it's just basically how many turns of sleep I'm going to get here. Because if I get full 3 turns of sleep for both my Pokemon, I think I'm dead. However, if I'm able to wake up any earlier than either of them, I can kill this Rillaboom and probably be able to 1v1 Chimecho with either of my Pokemon. So they go for a Wood Hammer, which does honestly more damage than I was hoping into the Hydrapple, but with the Life Orb and the recoil from that, it does a chunk of damage into that Rillaboom. And here we are able to lose a special defense drop, which is really annoying. We don't wake up, which is somewhat annoying. However, the fact that they doubled up at that spot definitely makes me feel reasonable, because I don't think they're going to be able to kill it next turn without a Rillaboom attacking, which means that Bronzong is likely going to be able to kill Rillaboom without having to take too much damage. So here we just go for the body press, hope to wake up. I go for protect in case they do go for the attack into Rillaboom, which is what I'm expecting. And if I wake up here, get the protect off, it'll burn an extra turn of sleep for Bronze Lung, which will increase the chance of it waking up, and I'll be really happy. So they end up going for the Terra Dark on the Rillaboom here. I'm assuming the main idea behind this was to try to get the kill on Hydrapple without having to use Woodhammer, because Woodhammer almost certainly is going to kill it. However, luckily for me, Hydrapple wakes up, I get the protect off, which means that there's a good chance I'm going to stall their turn out because they do in fact go for the knockoff into the Hydrapple, and they also, in addition to that, went for the Psychic into that spot. Each of these turns, even though I'm still asleep, because they set up grassy terrain for me, I'm getting a little bit of more health, and that little bit of health is really big for me, especially in the possible late game of a Chimecho versus Hydrapple or Chimecho versus Bronzong situation. So here I decide to just go for double attacks into Rillaboom, because I should be able to kill Rillaboom if I attack. And in addition, I don't really care about Chimecho because, like I said, I think I should be able to kill Chimecho with whichever Pokemon on my field. I just need to be able to deal with this Rillaboom. So they go for the Woodhammer, which ends up killing the Hydrapple, which is not too surprising based on how much damage it did previously. Hopefully, we're hoping that it dies here from Recoil and Life Orb, in which it doesn't die from the Recoil from the Woodhammer, but it does die from the Life Orb, which means I feel really great because we are at a Bronzong versus Chimecho endgame, in which as long as they don't have Shadow Ball, I think I should be able to win this game. And though, given the fact that it didn't go for Shadow Ball the previous turn, and how much that did as a crit, I'm feeling very good, because it looks like the best damage they have is in fact that Psychic, which I resist and does almost no damage. And so now we're in this super long game, because not only do I not do much damage, they also have Yawn, which can make it go even longer. However, outside of max sleep turns and a couple of special defense drops from these Psychics in a row, I think I'm in good shape. I decided to go with the Psychic Noise specifically to try to prevent a little bit of healing from the leftovers. I don't think that was actually the optimal play. I think just Body Press or even an Iron Defense would probably have done more work. However, here I just decided to just go for the Body Press to get a little bit more damage now that they can't gain health for a couple turns. We see once again they go for Psychic, which does very little damage. Like I said, I think at this point we 100% are going to be winning this as long as we don't get a 3-turn sleep into multiple Psychic or special defense drops from Psychic. However, we are asleep. And sadly we lose grassy terrain, which means we're no longer getting healing. So this is all the health I'm going to have for the entirety of the game, since my item was knocked off earlier. Psychic is doing about 12 damage, which I should be able to take about 10 more turns of this, which means I feel like I should be able to win, since they are almost certainly only 2 body presses away, and they can't even read me waking up given the fact that I'm slower. So I will always be able to get an Iron Defense plus 2 attacks off, which is why I am going for the Iron Defense before I wake up, because I want to be able to, I believe 2 plus 4 body presses will always kill this thing, and I'm pretty much guaranteed to get it off since I'm slower. So they go for another Psychic. Luckily no special defense drop, and we wake up, get up to plus 4 body or Iron Defense, so plus 4 defense, and so now we're going for plus 4 body presses into this Chimecho, which though it's going to heal a little bit, 2 body presses should definitely kill it from this range. So we go for the first body press, which could even kill it at this point. They go for the Yawn, which is definitely the correct play. Technically, if their last move is Protect, which we haven't seen yet, they could maybe, stalls out a little bit more, but I don't think it's going to be enough, and a second body press should get the game here. So this game was definitely really close. It came down to this end game. I think a big aspect was me being able to kill that Arcanine and then going for the Flamethrower into my Farigiraf instead of my Hydrapple. But once we were able to get rid of Arcanine, they were down to Chimecho and physical attackers, in which Bronzong was in a very advantageous position. And luckily we got there for game 2, and let's go to game 2. So here we are for game 2. Overall, I was pretty happy with the game. Farigiraf was quite annoying for them. Bronzong ended up sweeping in the end. And so the big one is I don't think Bronzong is going to be as powerful in the game. I'm assuming they're going to ring some sort of counter to Bronzong, given the fact that it kind of just, 1v3 them almost at the very end. And so I expect that, something else was probably more useful. I decide that probably Sableye seems like a better support mon over the Ariados, because Reflect can lower the attack itself, Quash can give you some speed control, and also just Foul Plays can do pretty good chunks of damage. I still think Farigiraf is pretty good. Obviously, its big downside is that it doesn't have Protect, but I think that it did put a lot of pressure and definitely took a lot of hits. And also, there's a good chance they might try to do Wood Hammers. I decided I want to bring Hydrapple because I'm expecting Crawdaunt to come, and I really need a way to deal with it. And given that I have Hydrapple, and I don't really think Bronzong is going to be as good, I think Rhyperior is definitely going to be the best one, especially since I don't really want to tear with Hydrapple, given the fact that I'm a little bit concerned with the Crawdaunt. And so with that, let's get into the game. So they end up leaving Tinkaton and Rillaboom in front of my Farigiraf and Sableye. This definitely is somewhat annoying since they're Bold Breaker, which means that even though Farigiraf might have an ability that prevents priority, Fake Out can still work. And so I'm assuming that there's a good chance they're going to Fake Out into my Farigiraf, which I don't have Protect, so I can't really play around other than just trying to click a move and hoping they don't. And then Sableye is kind of in a position where we could theoretically Quash, but that doesn't really do anything because my Farigiraf can't attack. So there's really only reasonable play is to Foul Play or to Reflect. And here I decided to just go for the Reflect to minimize the damage into this. Obviously, there's a chance that Terra Fairy would make some amount of sense here to try to play around a knockoff into the Farigiraf. However, I don't really want to do that because then next turn they could go for a free steal move into the Farigiraf, since they will outspeed me. They do in fact go for the Mold Breaker Fake Out. Not too surprising. We get the Reflect off, which is really nice in front of two physical attackers, and they go for the Wood Hammer into the Sableye, in which Sableye is able to take, not particularly well, but well enough. And Rillaboom takes a really big chunk of damage. So not the best turn, but not the worst turn. We took a lot of damage with Sableye, but we did get a Reflect up, and we are in a position where they need to either switch out this Tinkaton or I threaten to Encore it. So here I decided to just go for a Trick Room. I consider going for a Hyper Voice instead, just get a little damage, but I think Trick Room seems pretty important here. And the big question is do I want to read the switch out that I'm going to Encore that spot or not? I decided to do the safe move and just go for the Encore into that spot. I would really hate for them to do something other than, because that could definitely be really annoying for me. And I decided, like I said, go for the safe play. They do switch out. Like I said, I definitely considered reading that. I don't think it would have been an unreasonable decision to read that. However, even if I did read that, I think Foul Play doing so little damage was kind of the main deciding factor. And so with the Encore, with the switch in, the Encore is going to fail. So they end up tearing into the Rillaboom, which makes me assume that they're probably going to go for a knockoff. I definitely could have Terra'd reading this, but the main reason I didn't is because I do have Rillaboom in the back, which I really want to Terra. And as we see, the Encore doesn't do anything. With the Reflect up, I think I should be able to take this, and we see that we do in fact take it, even though it does a massive chunk of damage. However, we are able to get Trick Room up, which I'm pretty happy with, especially given the fact that we have two Pokemon that are weak, or that Hyper Voice can hit pretty well, and we get a little bit of recovery up. So here it's the first turn of Trick Room. I consider, switching out into one of these Pokemon, reading some possibly like a grass or a knockoff, but I decide I just want to go for some damage. I decided to just go for Hyper Voice to get a little bit of spread damage and go for a Foul Play into the Arcanine just to do a pretty good chunk of damage. Trip the board and try to get them in range of like Rock Slides. So they switch back out into the Tinkaton here, which definitely makes this Hyper Voice less impactful. However, it's still going to do a reasonable damage into the Rillaboom. However, I definitely feel a little bit worse about it. The Foul Play, as we see, does not do a good chunk of damage since it is resisted. However, Hyper Voice does do pretty good damage into the Rillaboom, and the Rillaboom is going to kill the Frugraph here. However, luckily for me, we do in fact do a fair amount of damage to this Rillaboom. And so here, the big question is, what are we going to switch in? And I decide I just want to switch in the Rhyperior because the Rhyperior threatens to kill both of these Pokemon, where the Hydrapple really doesn't. And so with this, the big question is, do I want to read them not going for a Fake Out or not? And I decided to just play it safe and read the Fake Out, and I decided to just go for a Foul Play into the Rillaboom because I think Rillaboom is definitely the bigger threat, and since they both resist Dark, it's probably going to do more damage into this Rillaboom. So we go for the Protect. Like I said, I don't really want them to get a free Fake Out here, in which they did in fact go for a Fake Out, which definitely makes me pretty happy. The Foul Play should hopefully do pretty good damage, and which we see it does almost a little bit over 50% of the damage it dealt, and they end up just going for a knockoff into the Rhyperior, which makes me really happy about this position. So here, I think Foul Play should kill. However, I don't want to take a Steel move or like a Grassy Glide, so I decided to Terra to resist that and go for the high horsepower into the Tinkaton and then the Foul Play into the Rillaboom. I think technically I could have decided not to Terra here, since I think Foul Play just always kills, and Grassy Glide, though annoying, isn't going to actually kill me. However, given the fact that they likely have like Crawdaunt in the back, I think the Terra in here makes a fair amount of sense. So they end up switching out the Tinkaton into the Crawdaunt here, in which, though not the most bulky Pokemon, it should in fact take a high horsepower from my Rhyperior at max health. And so the Terra here ends up being a little bit wasted. However, even if I didn't Terra here, I probably was going to need a Terra next turn no matter what. And so I think it's okay to do it as what I did. They go for a Grassy Glide, which does a reasonable amount of damage into my Sableye, but my Sableye survives. High horsepower does nice, over 50%, and then the Foul Play finishes up the Rillaboom. And so here I'm feeling pretty okay. I have Hydrapple in the back, which definitely kills Crawdaunt from this range. Rhyperior threatens to one-hit KO Tinkaton from this point, and Arcanine, and at this point we disconnect. This is super annoying. My Switch, I don't know what's wrong, but has been having issues recently, and we lose connection. Not only is it super annoying for me, it's super annoying for Matrix, who actively, I think, was feeling really bad a lot of the time while we ended up trying to recreate this exact time. The recreation was incredibly annoying. I think it took us 4 times to get it correct, and it was only like mostly correct. But with that, we can go to the point in which we recreated it. So we're back at the point in which we recreated it. This is the last turn of Grassy Terrain and Reflect. And it is now a 3v3 where I have a full health Rhyperior, full health Hydrapple on the back, and then my Sableye, which is at very low, but is still alive. They bring out the Tinkaton, in which here I definitely feel like I'm kind of just forced to go for a Protect and go for a Reflect. So Reflect to minimize damage, give me Reflect pretty much for the rest of the game, and I should go for a Protect because I don't really want to get hit with the Fake Out. Obviously, there's a chance that they don't Fake Out, especially since I Protected last time, but I don't really want to risk it at this point, especially since I feel like I'm in pretty good shape. Luckily for me, they just go for a Protect on their Crawdaunt, which I'm not exactly sure the decision behind that. However, the Reflect getting up is really nice, and even if we lose Sableye here, I'm pretty happy. However, luckily for me, Sableye stays on at 1 health because they go for a knockoff. Definitely Gigaton Hammer would have killed, but at this point I'm feeling really good about my position. I decide I just want to go for a quash onto this Tingaton and get the high horsepower to kill. I do not want them to knock off my clear amulet so that I can do good damage into the Arcanine here. In addition, I don't really want to take a big chunk of damage from Gigaton Hammer, and I don't think Sableye is doing too much with the foul plays at this point. Even though there's a chance that maybe 2 foul plays could kill Crawdon, I just want to minimize that altogether. So we get the quash off, and so now we are guaranteed to outspeed the Tinkaton with Rhyperior. They go for a Crab Hammer, which does honestly less than I was expecting, not even really 40%, and we are basically able to get the clean kill on Tinkaton with high horsepower, which definitely does not surprise me. I was more or less expecting that. And at this point, we're feeling pretty good about our position. So here our main concern is Will-O-Wisp on the Arcanine, because Hydrapple cleanly kills Crawdon in the back, and so the big thing is we just want to make sure we don't get Will-O-Wisped, so I go with the Quash to make sure Arcanine doesn't Will-O-Wisp and the high horsepower. Given that I'm not intimidated, I believe there's a good chance I should be able to survive this, or should kill this with the high horsepower. However, there's definitely a chance that maybe Rock Slide would have been better here, because that probably does kill Crawdon and does a pretty good chunk of damage. But like I said, I'm more concerned with the Arcanine than the Crawdon, given the fact that I have Hydrapple in the back. We get the Quash off. They go for another Crab Hammer, which does, about the same, but enough that it's going to kill me next turn. But we're luckily able to get in a position where we are hurt Arcanine notably. Arcanine sadly survives the high horsepower and kills my Sableye. However, honestly, I'd be more okay with losing Sableye there than Rhyperior, because Rhyperior definitely requires them to them to do it. So here I just go for the kill on the Corphish and the Rock Slide, which will probably kill both of them if it connects. I think this was probably a slight misplay. I think I probably should have just gone for the Arcanine with the Hydrapple, since I think I take hits from the Crawdon a little bit better. However, there's a chance that Crawdon could be like a special mixed and could have like Ice Beam, and so I don't think it's the worst, but I definitely think that the Arcanine is probably the slightly bigger threat. So they go for the Flamethrower, which does a fair bit of damage into the Hydrapple. The Crab Hammer ends up finishing off the Rhyperior, and I'm going to able to kill this Crawdon with the Energy Ball, and now we're basically in a position where we should win the game as long as they don't crit high roll a Flamethrower with this Arcanine, since it's at so low HP, which definitely puts me in a favorable position. And so as long as it's not a crit high roll, we should win with this Earth Power. They go for the Flamethrower and doesn't crit, which means that we win the game and get there 2-0. This is definitely a close game, even though, it was a 2-0 in my favor. Both of these games come down to me having one Pokemon, in which both of those Pokemon probably could have died if they came up a turn earlier, if they took one more big attack. So definitely really close. In addition, I definitely feel like it was super awkward for Matrix, kind of losing the mental momentum going in game 2 because of the disconnect, and I definitely need to check my hardware on my Switch, because my Switch is definitely was definitely to blame for that disconnect, and so I'm sorry to that for Matrix. I definitely feel, because it made the match definitely less entertaining and definitely probably hurt him a little bit, but I'm happy to get the win despite that, and I hope that Matrix has a good rest of the season, and I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see y'all next time.